when I woke up in that hospital bed, I mean, the appreciation that I have for just being alive, I'm fortunate. It could have very easily been, I could have been one that didn't survive, you know? Talk about anyone who's at home, whether it's anyone who has aspirations or dreams, or anyone who wants to get into business. Everyone's so focused on the outcome that they lose track of the journey.
Hello and welcome to Make It Happen with Will Polston. I'm Will Polston. This is episode number 163, and in this episode we're talking about dealing with grief with Daniel Costa. Two things in life that we all as human beings will face is adversity and dealing with loss. Daniel's mission is clear: to equip as many people as possible with the tools to confront adversity head on, to find meaning in the midst of life's toughest challenges, and to emerge stronger, more resilient versions of themselves. Daniel, by the age of 29, had already weathered storms of unimaginable magnitude, losing both his father and brother to suicide, losing his other two brothers to murder in a family suicide by his mother, and losing his mother to cancer. He knows firsthand the depth of pain and despair. More importantly, he is an example of how to overcome trauma, dealing with loss, building resilience, and finding meaning in your life. Renowned for his nuanced insights and profound wisdom, Daniel's work transcends boundaries, touching the lives of clients from all walks of life. From trauma survivors seeking healing to elite athletes and entrepreneurs striving for peak performance, Daniel's guidance is sought after worldwide. Through his inspirational speaking engagements, coaching sessions and workshops, Daniel shares his unique philosophy, a blend of lived experience over a decade of coaching in professional football, in-depth studies of human behaviour and somatic healing, as well as completing his Masters in Mental Toughness, Resilience and Self-Efficiency in Elite Football. Daniel stands ready to guide others through their darkest hours, inspiring them to discover their resilience and strength within and emerge victorious against the odds. So Daniel, welcome to the show.
Awesome. Thanks, Will. Thanks for having me. Awesome to see you again.
Likewise, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation. So I often start these podcasts speaking with my guests around the mission that they're on. And I know that you are inspired to work with elite achievers, high performers, to want to go on and do great things. And obviously, when people are striving towards whatever it is that they may perceived to be a great achievement, that comes with its challenges. It can come with having to experience the loss and the stress and all of the hurdles that have to be overcome in that pursuit. And what I'm always fascinated with is, well, that's all well and good, but why? Where does that come from? And that's what I've spent 25 years learning from different people of what is it that's going on in between their ears that makes them want to do what they do and the reasons they do it. So I know I've already touched on this during the intro, but you and I met in a very synchronous way. You know, I trained with you as a DeMartini method facilitator a couple of years ago, but then as a result of other events going on in my life, which again, the synchronicity in this happening is just incredible, which we'll come on to touch on, is just incredible. But so let's go with that then. So why is it that you do what you do? And let's go into that. And what I will say, and I've already touched on it in the intro, is that for some people they may find this initially a little bit of a potentially upsetting, but the place that Daniel's coming from is complete love, and I know you'll definitely understand that by the end of the episode. So over to you, Daniel.
Cool. Thanks, Will. So it all begins for me at a young age. As you can hear, I'm South African. And from a young age, I've just always been fascinated by learning, by human behavior. I mean, my dad was a renowned psychiatrist in South Africa, so he was always fascinated by the mind. And that's definitely where my huge love for the brain originates from. Then at the same time, my mom was a medical doctor. So I got to see firsthand how she helps people. Again, just being there for people when they need her the most. So those were my two biggest idols growing up. Those were my parents. Then I was one of four brothers. So I had three older brothers, Andre, Michael, and Philip. I was the youngest, so it was an awesome time growing up in South Africa. And then it was my unique experiences growing up in South Africa that really was the driving force until this moment, to be honest, that created this huge drive to understand human behavior, to understand mentality, to understand all of that. So at age 4, my father committed suicide, and I find that quite interesting, to be honest. I mean, it was fascinating. He was brilliant with the mind, helping people with the mind. I've had numerous of his patients reach out to me in the past, expressing how much of an impact he had on their lives. So I was 4 years old, so I don't remember anything about my father. In the space of losing my father at age 4 until the age 7, my mother had to take over looking after all four of her sons. She lost her mother, she lost her brother, she got diagnosed with cancer. So then there already, in my mind, I was starting to understand the effects of unprocessed grief, the effects of stress, all of those effects on not just your performance, but on your being as a human being. So how that affects you if you don't process that in the right way or have the right tools to deal with that, the effects of that. So to be honest, that led to my mother having a break point in her life, a mental breakdown. So in November 1998, Friday afternoon, any normal Friday afternoon, me and my brothers went with my mom to get a takeaway on the way home. So as we got home, me and my brothers went upstairs, preparing for dinner, getting changed. And that's the last thing I remember from that evening. Next thing I know, I wake up in hospital and there's a nurse looking over me. So of course, I have no idea what's going on. I ask her, I say, okay, where are my brothers? Where's Philip? Where's Andre? Where's Michael? So she says, Philip is right next to you. So I turn to my left and I see my brother unconscious on the bed. And then I ask her, where's Michael and Andre? And her response is that Michael and Andre are in heaven. So I just paused, not too sure what's going on. And then I ask her, okay, what about my mother? And she's like, yo, your mom's in hospital. She's here, she's in ICU, but she's in a different room. So that in that moment, I just froze, to be honest. As a 7-year-old, I didn't know what was going on. And yeah, so those were, by the age of 10, 2 key contributing personal experiences that I went through that really drove, again, like I mentioned, my huge desire to understand humans' behavior, to understand mentality, and to understand what goes on in someone's mind behind the actions that they do. So if I fast forward up until today.
So if we can just go back slightly then. So you said that you were getting the takeaway. So you're going to have the takeaway on the Friday afternoon, and then next thing you knew, you woke up in hospital. So what happened from the moment of having the takeaway until the moment of waking up in hospital?
Sure. So that was Friday evening. I woke up Sunday afternoon. My brother only woke up Sunday evening. So we were to find out. And I remember the moment specifically in the hospital that week, because we didn't see our mother for the whole week because she was in ICU and fighting for her life. So we were to find out that my mom was the cause of it. So my mom reached a breaking point in her life, and her view was, listen, I can't look after my children. The rest of the family's in Portugal. I don't want to leave this burden on anyone else. So I went out. So what I'm going to do is take everyone with me. So my mom, what she did, she put tranquilizers and sleeping pills in mine and my brother's food. And then when we were asleep that same evening, she came around and injected us each with lethal injections. Following that, she went around and sprinkled the house with some paraffin and petrol, and she lit the house on fire whilst then administering herself also with lethal injections. Fortunately, it was our neighbors. So this was late early Saturday morning, about 3 a.m., when she lit the house on fire. So fortunately, our neighbors saw the smoke, called the ambulance, and it was actually a tow truck driver. So they're the guys that go pick up the cars when you have accidents. So it's actually them that heard on the radio this emergency that there's a house on fire in Morningside, Santon, and it was them that came, and straight away they jumped the gate. And fortunately, they came inside the house. They saw my mom at that stage. She was on fire from trying to light up the whole face, but she couldn't feel anything. And they immediately, fortunately, went upstairs and came into the rooms and picked up myself, my older brother, Philip, Then they came back and then checked on Michael and Andre, brought us all out. And then it was at that time that they saw that Michael and Andre had passed on.
Yeah. Yeah. So you wake up, you're in hospital, you've learned that this has happened. And then what? What then happens over the coming years with that? Because that's quite the experience.
Yeah, look, so like I said, as a 7-year-old, especially when I heard the news, I froze. I didn't really understand what was going on. My brother Philip was 3 years older than me. So I know, for example, from reading in the newspapers, that his response to when we got told about the story, he was quite upset. He's like, why didn't the tow truck drivers save Michael? Why didn't they save Andre? Why did they save me? Where what happened after that, in the space of 2 weeks, we had to have the memorial for my brothers. And then my mom only woke up and was stable about a week later. So that was the first time we were able to see her. And then my uncle from overseas had to come across, my mom's brother. And it was decided that we would leave the country to go live with him, because, of course, my mom had to face the repercussions of her actions. So that meant court cases, all of that. So me and my brother left South Africa. And that was at a moment where a lot of people asked me, how did I cope? Well, and at that time, it all came down to football for me. So I moved across to Portugal. I got to meet the family in Portugal, my extended family from both sides. As I mentioned, my parents moved across to South Africa after studying. So meeting the whole family really helped at that moment. So that was a big contributor to help keep me safe at that time. And then I got introduced to football. So got to be at training 3 times a week, playing games on the weekends. So anytime I was on that football field, I forgot about reality. And that's where my huge love for football in particular comes from, and my huge understanding of the power of sport. And that's why I use sport today as one of my tools to help people and connect with people.
Yeah, that's incredible. And then where did football then lead you to? So after playing football in Portugal, then where did you end up
Yeah,
in
so at
football?
that age, of course, becoming fascinated with the game. Of course, everyone's aspirations as a 7-year-old. Okay, I want to do this professionally. I want to become a professional footballer. So I spent 2 years living in Portugal. So what happened in the space of 2 years, my mom had to go through court cases, and she went through a court case, and it was decided, well, she was found not guilty. Extremely controversial decision. Back home, I can remember people agreed with it. A lot of people didn't agree with it. What I found fascinating, seen from afar and through the news and all of that, was the support that my mom got from her patients. So my mom's practice was based in Wynberg, Alexandra, which is one of your poorest areas in South Africa. So her nickname was the Good Doctor. So she had that support from her patients during that time. So how the judge got to the ruling of not guilty, and conditions of my mom being mentally insane at the time, was the reports from the psychiatrists from both the defense and the prosecution side, which found that my mom, at the time they did the tests with her afterwards, that she was mentally fine. It was just mentally, she was insane at that time. And her specific words were, she could see her actions. She was outside of her body and she could see what she was doing, but she had absolutely no control. So as all of that's happening in those 2 years, me and my brother are in Portugal. We got the football around family. My mom gets the non-guilty verdict. So that allows me and my brother to move back to South Africa to come live with our mother. And then it was at that stage until about 16 years old that I progressed with my football as a player. So I was a goalkeeper. Will, you've met me in person. I'm not the tallest guy. But yeah, so fortunately, and that's again the importance of having those foundational skills. So when I was in Portugal from age 7 until 9, I got to learn the basics, and I had high level coaching around me. So when I came back to South Africa, I was already at a good standard as a goalkeeper. So I carried on playing, and when I was 15, we went overseas to play in the Milk Cup in Ireland, and I got scouted by Blackburn Rovers. I went to go spend a week and a half there on trial, and the feedback after them was yeah, listen, you need to work on some of your physical attributes, get in the gym, do this certain stuff and all of this. And I was like, okay, cool. And they said, we'll keep monitoring you. The following year, I went on another tournament overseas. This time we went to, apologies. So when I was 15, we went to the Manchester Cup. When I was 16, we went to Mill Cup in Ireland. And following that tournament, we got to the semi-finals, and Newcastle United approached me. And it was that moment when 2 weeks later, I went for a trial at them for about 2 weeks. And their feedback was, listen, you've got everything, you've got the attributes, you're just too short. So being a South African, oh, that's a huge generalization, so let me not finish that sentence. But I just thought, okay, cool. What are ways I can get around this? So I immediately came home. I remember telling my mom at that stage, we were going through huge financial stress with my mom. She had just changed jobs. I mean, just for me to book my ticket to go to Newcastle for trials, I had to pawn all of my PlayStation, camera, all of that, because we had no income coming in. And because that's what my coach had put in my mind, it was a done deal. So it was, okay, arrive at Newcastle United, they will sign you and everything's done. That didn't happen. They said I was too short. So that really hit me hard. So I came back home and I went to a growth hormone specialist. I said, okay, let's put me on growth hormones. Maybe I can grow a few more centimeters. Because as again, you know, when you're pursuing something that you absolutely love, you're willing to find ways and do whatever it takes to get there. And he turned around and he said, maybe you'll grow 3 more centimeters. And I was like, okay, cool, let's do it. And then he's like, yeah, but I'll charge you about £1,500 a month. So I just remember getting up and I was like, okay, cool. Cheers. Bye-bye. I'm out. So that led me to my first experience of depression, where my big safety net of football had been taken away from me. So now it made me start thinking about, okay, cool, what I want to do. I was lost. Football was a huge part of my identity. And yeah, so that led me for the next 5 years, to be honest, trying to figure out what to do. What's this? I try to go study certain universities in South Africa, but I had no direction. That, okay, I want to become a professional footballer always gave me, like, I know from reading your book, the North Star, you know, so I had the direction, where there I didn't. And I was like, okay, cool. I didn't have the tools to be able to cope. So fortunately, my mom was there at the time and she's like, Danny, I think it's best you go on antidepressants, which I needed at the time.
So a couple of things I just want to ask about, and I think there's definitely some there's going to be some, for people that are listening, there's going to be some common themes and there's going to be some questions that people have got. So the common theme that I want to start with is, you had this North Star. You know, for you, the mission was you want to be playing football, playing at the highest level. It was a game that you loved. You're right. You and I, we are vertically challenged, let's say, in the sense of particularly when it comes to football. You know, most goalkeepers are 6 foot plus, and we're not. But you still had this position. So that was your first experience of the setback, and the depression were, or the feelings of depression were from, you had this fantasy of, right, I can be a professional footballer, I can play for Newcastle United, I can do this, but then you were experiencing firsthand the that not happening, and that was then enabling you to not see how that was guiding you. Like, you, there was that break, and I know so many people listen to this, they will have this dream, whatever it is, but then they've had something, some sort of external event that's got in the way, or they perceive to have got in the way of being able to live their dream. Right, so that's one of the things there. The other thing that I know a lot of people will be thinking here, or certainly wanting the question answered, is when everything happened with your mum, and you said that obviously you got to a point where your mum, you and her were obviously speaking. She was saying about having antidepressants and doing that. When everything happened, I know you're away for 2 years in Portugal. How did you feel towards your mum?
Sure, that's probably not probably, that is definitely the most asked question I've received recently when I shared my whole story. And I know personally from my closest friends and people, that's a question that many people have always wondered. And to be honest, I've also wondered how I was able to forgive my mom. A few things come to mind. Well, number one was, in that space of those 2 years, my mom was able to come visit my brother and I in Portugal for about 3 weeks. And it was at that moment where she sat us down, and it's a moment I'll never forget. She was seated on the couch on a one seater. I sat on the armrest on the right. My brother sat on the armrest to the left, and it was her at that moment when she told us everything that happened that evening in 1998, and she didn't sugarcoat it at all. She told us absolutely everything, methodologically, of what happened. Boom, 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 boom. And it was at that moment where like a deeper respect and love came for my mom, from really owning up to what she did. And the biggest thing is I knew my mom before the event. So that's where my huge fascination with human behavior arises. And that's why today I use it as, I don't like to judge people, because I think it's easy to judge based on actions, based on what you see, based on your own perceptions, where I thought, firstly, judging is easier. To understand is trickier. To understand, you need to think. So me and my brother understood my mom. And that's why I'm able to articulate it in the way I am. And I'm not overwhelmed by the experience, because it's taught me one of the greatest gifts that I use now in my work in helping others, where I don't care about judging people. I'm so much more interested in understanding, okay, cool, what drives a human being to lose it mentally, to have that loss of control, and it's a common pattern I've seen in my family, where it's that extremity of, if you don't process grief, if you don't process stress, if you don't have tools to help you cope with normal life challenges, and that's why I've always been fascinated by studying elite athletes or elite performers, because they have tools, and they share the tools, and they try, okay, this didn't work, I'll try this, I'll try that. So from that experience, my brother and I chose to rather understand, and were able to forgive our mother. And I've never once been around my mom where I felt scared or anything like that. To be honest, I felt even a deeper love for her. One of my biggest fears growing up, and I remember it every single day, was going to wake up my mom and seeing, okay, is she breathing? Is she alive? When I woke up in that hospital bed, I mean, the appreciation that I have for just being alive, I'm fortunate. It could have very easily been, I could have been one that didn't survive, So that moment where I remember waking up and my eyes opening I was just, to be honest, fucking grateful to be alive. And yeah, so I think that answers your question.
I think that there's such an important lesson in that. In my experience, we tend to judge others on their actions and ourselves on our intentions. But when we take the opportunity to learn the intention why people do what they do, and one of the presuppositions of neurolinguistic programming is every action has a positive intention. All right, we may not perceive it to be positive for us, but if somebody's doing it to us, but when we choose to learn that intention, it's amazing how we can gain a new perspective and see what's going on. Because in that moment, and we've touched on it already in the podcast, was you said that about people that suppress challenging times, they don't deal with their stress very well. She lost her husband to suicide, she lost her sister, her mother, and also I remember you saying before there was like a big financial loss as well. So those losses, because losses comes in so many different forms. Yes, we have loss of a loved one, but then we have loss of a business, loss of a dream. You had the dream of football, and that was a perceived loss at that time. So you've experienced those losses, quote unquote, and have been able to transform that now into a way of being able to support other people to deal with those hardships. Because that for me is the moment when someone experiences a perceived loss. Is it their opportunity to step up or step out? And that's, I know, something that you're super inspired to do, is help people to gain a different perspective so they see it as something that's on the way, not in the way.
Beautifully said. Yeah, 100%. It's just basically what I want to do is just share the tools that have helped me. And yeah, there's been certain moments in my life where the tools and people have arrived and just really helped me through those moments.
And I'm so pleased you said that, because you said about using the tools. And this for me is why it's such an important conversation that we're having today, is because There is not a single person on this planet that's going to go through their life not having some form of disappointment, or what they at least at first perceive to be a disappointment. And the methodology that we've trained in is enabling people to gain that different perspective and see that actually it's not a disappointment at all. It's perfect, but helping them use the tools to gain the right perspective to be able to move forward. So let's fast forward. So that's happened. You know, that in itself is enough for a lifetime for most people. But it doesn't end there, does it?
No, it doesn't. So yeah, after, just to lead up to it. So after university, so at the age of 22, that's where I met Dr. John DiMartini, that whole methodology, a human behavioral specialist, the best in the world. And yeah, that's how me and you met many years later on. But that had a tremendous impact in my life. So again, there, like I said, there's a tool that I started to almost take my thinking and my obsessiveness with learning and like a passion for like human behavior, high performance, all of that. And then here was the ideal teacher that appeared in my life. So from there, at that stage, I tried a little bit more, to be honest, to play football, but my love for it had gone. And it was through his methodology that I was able to process my depression. And it led to me, from that day, I stopped taking antidepressants, and I've never had a headache since. So again, there, it started putting in my mind, okay, cool, there's ways, even though, don't get me wrong, the medication does play an important role in the world. I don't feel that it's the only solution. And my story, I'm an example of that. Once you have tools and you're able to process it, the need for a tablet is not necessary. So yeah, fast forward. So 22, what do we decide? Okay, cool. If I can't become a football player, let me become a football coach. Still stay within football, still stay within my love of helping people, being around elite environments and all of that. So from age 22 for over a decade until 32, I spent my life, the first 5 years, I said, okay, cool. We talk about building foundations. I thought about it in South Africa at age 22. What do I need to do to become the best coach that I could be? Again, I set a huge target. I said, okay, cool, I want to become the best coach I can be. I want to go coach in Europe. So I spent the first 5 years traveling from South Africa to Scotland, doing my UEFA badges, being around the best. So every time I would travel, I'd try to go visit certain teams. I would email them and be like, listen, I'm coming across. Can I come spend 1 or 2 days, see how it operates? So that's what I did until age 28. And then at that stage, excuse me, I was in professional football as a coach in South Africa. And I always wanted to move to London specifically. At that time, my brother had immigrated to London. He had been there for 2 years. He was in the finance world. So I wanted to go be with him, and I wanted to go learn from the best. I didn't want to stay in South Africa. I always loved like challenges, to be honest. So I wanted to go be around the best, learn from the best, have the opportunity, to go on the weekends and watch some of the best players in the world. So that was all inspiring to me. So I was in the process of moving across to London with my brother, because I, of course, had to find a job. And then it was in 2019, September, when I got a phone call that my mom had been rushed to the hospital. At this stage, me and my brother were overseas. So immediately we got on a plane that day, and we both came back to South Africa. So from September 2019 to April 2020, my mom 2018 September to 2019 April, my mom battled cancer for 8 months, and me and my brother were able to be with her every single day of it, experience it all with her, and see what happens to a human being on their process, passing away from a serious illness like cancer. So we managed to have that opportunity for 8 months. I call it opportunity. And yeah, I learned a lot from that, from those 8 months. And again, I had 1 or 2 tools in between it that I was still doing. And at stages when I didn't, it was extremely tough. The stress from my mom taking chemo, then once she would have the chemo, and the next day, her iron levels would drop, and it's rushing her to hospital so she can get blood transfusions. So, and me and my brother, fortunately, my brother at that stage tried to work from September until December. Then from January until April, he had to stop working, because at that stage, the cancer had spread to my mom's brain. So we were able to, and he was still able to get paid by his boss, which is incredible. So he was able to be with her every day. At that stage, I was also able to be with her every day. So my mom, she would go to the hospital where she was working as an emergency doctor, and we would sleep there. We would alternate. So again, that's where I learned now, and I look back, that the impact of high level stress, pressure, if you live in it. And a lot of modern society says to you today, okay, cool, push through it, go this. If you don't have tools to switch off or process that, I've seen firsthand how that catches up with you. So 2019 April, my mom passed away from cancer. And then it was at that stage, my brother and I, Philip, I moved across to London to live with him.
And then what happened then?
So then I spent the first 6 months, again, trying to find a job. And I remember one of the first things I did when I arrived in London, I went to go stand outside the Tottenham Hotspur training ground. So 2019 April, it was 2 weeks before Tottenham were playing the final against Liverpool. I had my sign for Mauricio Pochettino. I gave him the book 11 Rings by Phil Jackson, who was the renowned Chicago Bulls coach from, I think everyone knows now, after COVID. And it was just principles on how he leads and how he coaches. And I knew that correlated with Mauricio Pochettino because I'd read his book. So again, just trying to pursue my dream, find ways to get in, learn from the best. And so I stood outside for 18 hours with my sign saying, I've got a gift for you. I'd love to meet you. And after waiting the first day for 12 hours, came back the next day, waited, another 5-6 hours. And then eventually I met him. And I gave him the book, gave him the sign. And then as I left, stupidly, the CV that I'd gave him, I realized I'd given him the wrong number. It was my old UK number from a year before. So look, I'm sure one day I'll get to meet him again. But more importantly, and that again, now I look back, well, it's everyone's attached to the outcome. And I think that was a key lesson for me. And I think that's why, like, if you talk about anyone who's at home, whether it's anyone who has aspirations or dreams, or anyone who wants to get into business, everyone's so focused on the outcome that they lose track of the journey. So these key moments have taught me, like, to be honest, yes, I was a bit disappointed that the number was wrong, but just going out and standing there for 18 hours, what I learned from that was much more valuable. So again, anyway, fast forward 6 months, eventually find a job in football in South Africa. In London. And my journey begins coaching in London. At that same time, the following year, March, my brother went straight back into work. As I mentioned, he was in finance. So again, you're dealing with pressure, high level stress. And he didn't have the tools. So for example, from when we started the work, when I started the work at age 22, and I've been doing it now for the last 10, 12 years, the DeMartini work around human behavior, understanding that I haven't stopped. And that's been a huge part of my life, why I'm able to sit here today. Where he stopped after a while, and at that stage, he didn't have any tools. So from March 2020, he started having physical symptoms, which were your body feedback based on the high level stress. So he took a break from work, and for 3 months, and then we came to Portugal for 2 weeks, had a nice holiday in June, July, and then my birthday's in August, and we went out for my birthday dinner. And then it was at that dinner, look, a few things that happened in between, but at that dinner, he wasn't doing too well. And so I called an Uber after dinner. And then the following morning, that was the first time in my life I haven't slept 1 second. I was extremely nervous. So I sat him down the following day and I said, listen, Philip, you're about to go back to work in 2 weeks' time. Can we find some solution? Can we put some plan together to work on the tools so that when you do go back to work, you can handle the stress, you can handle the pressure? And I tried to have that conversation with him. We got into a heated argument. I left the apartment, and I got a message from him just saying that I'll see you tomorrow. So I called his girlfriend and I said, I presume he's coming to you, or what's the story? She's like, no, he's just going to a hotel. He'll be back tomorrow. So I messaged him just saying, listen, I'm here for you. If you need anything, I love you. And he says, yeah, don't worry, I'll see you tomorrow. Everything will be fine. And then the following day came, I hadn't heard anything from him. His girlfriend started calling me in the morning and she was like, have you heard from him? I'm like, no, I'm sure it's not checkout time yet. Everything will be fine. Lunchtime came, she came across and we started then calling around the hotels. So this was still what we're talking August 2020. So we're still in between COVID, after COVID, first round, second round, whatever it was. So not too many people were staying around in hotels, but I tried to call a few around the area, but some of them didn't give me the information. Some of them said he wasn't there. And then, of course, I started getting a bit nervous. I didn't know what was going on. I messaged him again saying, listen, Philip, if you're staying another night, please let us know. I'm just worried. And then it was around, 5:15 where the doorbell rang downstairs. We lived in an apartment on the first floor. So I went to go answer it and I picked up the phone and I answered it and they said, yeah, it's the police. Can we come see you? So I immediately buzzed them in. I remember I put the let's just call it a phone. I put the phone down and I remember I opened up the front door and I sprinted down the stairs. And as I was coming down the stairs, they were coming up and I, look, good catch. And I said to them, what the fuck's going on? And they said, can we chat to you inside? So I was like, okay, cool. So I turned around, walked up the remaining stairs, turned left into the apartment. And there was my brother's girlfriend at the end of the alley. And I remember just looking at her and I carried on walking towards her into the TV room. They closed the door behind me. And then as they came into the TV room, they turned to me and they said, look, unfortunately, we've found your brother in a hotel room. He's taken his life. And at that moment, I completely lost it. There was the person that, if there was ever anyone on this planet that could understand what I've experienced to the exact same degree, it would have been him. So, yeah, it took me a good, I lost track of time. I don't know how many minutes, how long, 15, 20 minutes of screaming, crying. And then I had to just control myself and I started asking the police some questions and they gave me some of the answers. And then I had to pick up the phone and start calling people to let people know what had happened.
That's quite the that's quite the life up until the age of not even 30, I think, at this point, in terms of things that have gone on. And I know that people listening to this right now will just be going, wow. From that moment until now, what do you perceive to have been the benefits that have enabled you to be grateful for what's happened and use the experiences, the multiple experiences up until your life at that point, to enable you to not decide to do the same thing and live an inspired life despite the adversities, despite the disappointments, despite the things that hadn't gone the way that you wanted them to?
Sure. So following that, I went back into work. So, okay, cool. Let me put my focus into work. And then I was at that stage where I was at Southend United and I got my first job in full-time football at that stage. The season before I was on a part-time base. So I went in from August until December of 2020 as an academy coach at Southend. Then it was in 2020 where I met another key figure in my life called Craig White through two mutual friends, because at the same time I was doing my master's in sporting directorship. So I met him through me, and then it was at that stage where he taught me another valuable tool, which was like embodiment work, your breath work, your meditation. And he taught me from that stage, and again until today. I mean, I had a session yesterday where I haven't stopped doing very particular tools that helped me, where it was teaching my body to feel again, because that completely shut off as a safety mechanism to the good and the bad things in life, you know. So again, fortunately, when I needed it the most, there was someone there to really help me. So from 2020 until 2022, I carried on doing the football. And then, to be honest, I started experiencing what I'd seen with my mom, what I'd seen with my brother in terms of, okay, I'm going still at work, but then I started not enjoying going to work. I started hating it. I started sometimes going to work and having panic attacks on the way to work. Because what happened with, and I got to learn this with any suicide, or particularly suicide, there's always inquests. So for a good 6 to 8 months afterwards, I'd always get emails, this or that, this, or here's the inquest, here's details, this is what we found. So I was always getting triggered. And at that stage, once I'd learned that work from Craig, it hadn't become a way of life for me. So I wasn't doing it every day. So that was a key lesson I was learning at that stage, where, okay, I'd do it a little bit there, I'd do it a little bit then, it really helped me. But then I'd go back into the stress, I'd go back into the pressure. And because I wasn't doing it every day, and because of what I personally experienced, my body was in dire need of consistency. So after 2 years, I came to the realization, look, football's not for me in terms of coaching. My values had shifted. When I moved to London, football was the most important thing in my life. Where after losing my brother, football definitely shifted, just moved from the top to another position. So it was at that moment when I decided to resign from my job, which was a huge shock to everyone. And then I've spent the last year and a half here in Portugal. To be honest, in the first few months, I just needed a breather, because those last 6 months of work, it was just me going full force, like everyone says, like push through it, all of this. But then it started impacting my health. And it was at that moment where I paused, took a break, and then just carried on doing the work on myself here in Portugal. So now I'm in a position where I want to utilize all my experiences. So just to round it off, going back to your question, Will, where you asked me how have I been able to go back to the experiences. So like, for example, I know now, for example, let's take an example with my brother. So when I picked him up once, it was the end of March when his head was shaking. He went to work and his head was just shaking like this. And I remember him sending me videos and I'm like, what's going on? And the ambulance went to go pick him up from work. And this was March 2020. So right in the bang middle of COVID. So they called me, they're like, your brother's just been taken to hospital. His head was just shaking uncontrollably. But like for 5-10 seconds, and then he's back conscious fully. And while he's shaking, he's still there with you. But it was just, it was just be shaking. So that was on a Friday afternoon. So I remember I got a call the Friday afternoon from him saying, listen, will you come pick me up? And this was 3 hours afterwards, after they had picked him up from his work. So I went to go pick him up. And at that stage, they had given him a tranquilizer to calm him down and all of that. So I was trying to talk to him, and there you have your brother sitting next to you in the Uber, and all of a sudden you're chatting and his head would start shaking. And you're like, whoa. And I'm looking at it at that moment, it impacted me hugely emotionally, because I didn't know how to handle it. So I was like, okay, what's going on? This is hectic. This is crazy. So then I started reaching out to certain people, trying to see what to do. Do I take him back to the emergency room? All of this. Is it something with his brain? I mean, is he going to shake? Is he going to have a seizure? Who knew what? So it was in those moments where I look back, and the work I've done, I go back and I look and, okay, cool. What's been the blessing, the upside of seeing my brother or seeing someone right next to you shaking uncontrollably? And again, it's imparted the gift with me in understanding like the effects that your emotions, the effects that stress, the effects that grief, all of that unprocessed stuff can have on you. So that feedback for him of his head shaking was just a feedback from his body saying, listen, well, you got to look at your own shit here. You've got some stuff to deal with. And the hardest thing for me, and from that March until August, which played on my mind quite a lot, was, look, to be honest, never once did the thought cross my mind that he was suicidal. Never once. Because else at certain times my approach would have been different. But it's just given me now the capability of, again, understanding human behavior deeper. And it's given me even more. The first question you asked me, what drives me? Never mind what happened to me, what's young. That's a huge driver for me. What causes the body to react like that? And more importantly, how can we process that? And so when I left football as a coach, my physical symptoms weren't that extreme, but it was at that moment when I realized, okay, cool. The tools that I have, they can't be used sparingly. It has to become a way of life. And that's what I've done now the last year and a half, where I've incorporated them fully into who I am. So now I'm in a position where I can help people. I don't need help anymore in terms of dealing with what I've experienced. And there's certainly, look, they'll things come up in the future. It's not you reach one stage and everything's beautiful and you're done and you're perfect. No, you just go. Life is all about evolving. So everyone faces unique challenges in their life so that they can surpass those challenges and just grow as a human being.
And what a perspective. So you've made reference on numerous occasions to tools. You know, a lot of these tools that you've embodied and you apply. You know, I think of personal development, self mastery, whatever you want to label it as a way of life. It's a bit like being fit. You know, nobody just goes, oh yeah, I'm gonna go to the gym every day for 3 months and then I'm done for the year. It doesn't work like that. You know, it has to become a way of life, an ongoing, never ending process, constant and never ending improvement. You know, that type of Kaizen approach to life. If you were to say, what for people that are listening to this, and again, contextually, I'm sure there's very different situations, but people have experienced challenging emotions. They've experienced some form of grief, whether it's grief with a family member, it's grief of losing a business, losing a dream, these types of things that we've said about disappointment. What would you say the top 3 tools are that people can use and apply from today that helps them move from experiencing something as distress to eustress? And what I mean by that, for everybody that's listening, is distress is stress that you would typically label as bad stress. Eustress is good stress. EU in Greek means good stress, and that's what we're looking for, that optimal level of stress. So what would you say are the 3 tools that you've found most beneficial, that you've been applying as by a way of life now, that other people could apply, that enables them to be more resilient and deal with those disappointments and challenges as and when they come up?
Great question. I think number 1 would be finding a tool that helps you elevate your own consciousness. So it's by asking, one of our mentors, he talks about the quality of your life is based on the quality of the questions you ask. So self-reflection is huge self-reflection, and then that leads to self-awareness, and that leads to understanding of who you are. So what happens when you face a challenge, you become emotional about it. So that hinders your ability to think logically about the situation. So it's learning to take a pen and ask yourself tough questions. So everyone must remember, like, I know trauma has such a negative connotation to the word, but if you go look at anyone who's done anything in this world, they've faced huge challenges. And it's so interesting, Will, that I always look back and they always, if you see them in future interviews, they're like, oh, this happened, but it actually turned out to be the biggest blessing in my life. So if that's the case, then what's stopping people from analyzing the situation as it happens, or as close to the situation? You don't need time. You don't have to wait for time to teach you to look back and be like, okay, I didn't get that job. I didn't get that client. I didn't perform well in this situation. It's like, okay, cool. So how do you analyze each of those situations as close to in the moment as possible, so it shifts your perspective on it, and then that dilutes your emotional reaction to it? So number 1 would be definitely finding a tool that elevates your consciousness, because that's all that life is growing in consciousness, growing to new levels. At new levels, you'll face new challenges. Number 2 would be do some sort of practice where teaches you to feel. So that can be anything from embodiment work. So what I mean by embodiment work, it could be anything from dancing to yoga, to meditation, to breath work. Because at the bottom line, and I find it fascinating how we all forget, we at the base, we are energy. So if you can't feel your energy, and if you can't feel your being and your emotions, you're blocking off a huge part of who you are, and you're blocking off your deeper understanding of who you are. So I didn't even know this existed until 2-3 years ago, to an extent. that I have an understanding of it today. But you definitely need some tool to reconnect with your physical body, because like I said, at the bottom base, we are definitely energy. Number three, I would say a support system. So find people that can relate, reach out to people, talk about it. I think talking definitely helps. I think it's very, very, what's the word? Very important that you find the right people to talk to. So try find people that have been there, lived it, or are experts in what you're trying to find solutions for. Because what happens, and I've 100% been guilty of it. I think we all are in life. It's very easy to get caught up in being a victim. Again, like it comes back to what I mentioned to you in the beginning, because it's easier to be a victim. The one thing, when you talk to the right person, that they will teach you is, at the end of the day, you have one life, and you are the person responsible for your life. And from me, why it took me so long and why I didn't want to accept that, because it takes away your excuses. It makes you grow up. It makes you become an adult and face the reality of life, that you are fully responsible. You are fully accountable for all your actions and decisions in this world. So if I had to try summarize, I think it would be those three tools. Number one, find something that elevates your consciousness. Number two, find something that reconnects you to your body. And number three, find a support system that works for you.
Amazing. Daniel, do you remember the first phone conversation that we had on, like, properly on the phone?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
So I'm going to share this with everybody that's listening, because up until this point, when Daniel and I had this phone call, I was 34 years old, and there is not a single experience that I'd had until then that was more of a synchronicity that I'd ever experienced. And I want to share this because I think it may be helpful. And it certainly was helpful to me for a variety of different reasons. But I want people to understand that nothing is ever happening by accident. You know, it's all part of this grand design that most of us aren't kind of aware of what's happening. So how it actually came about, I'm going to share with people, because I want people to see where to use this as a an opportunity to see where there's synchronicity in their own lives, because there are no coincidences, only synchronicities. So a friend of mine, well, when we first met, so I vividly remember it when we were doing our method training. It was on Zoom. I was watching on Zoom, and there was a grief process that one of our mentors, Dr. John D. Martin, took you through, and he was helping you with the grief process. I don't know how long it was, 2.5, maybe 3 hours, where he dissolved the grief around your brother taking his life, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in that period of time, you'd gone from experiencing all of the emotions that come with grief and the guilt and all the other stuff that you'd had, to then within that 2.5, 3 hour period, to then sort of dissolving the grief and being in love. That's right. That's what you experienced when he did that intervention with you. Yeah.
Yeah, correct. And I've got it on video, which I will share one day, just to show people the process. And it's a process I use today, because I've seen, again, just quickly with my family's history and beyond that, is just this whole perception that you need to grieve for years and years about someone. This process allows you to dilute that grief. And you ask me now, like, how am I able to go back into situations and extract the insights and the lessons from it? So when, for example, when I come across anyone or anything, like, I use lessons that I learned from my brother. I use lessons that I learned from my mom, and in a way, they live on through me. So I feel connected to them, even though they're not here.
Yeah, absolutely. So I remember seeing that, and then last September, a friend of mine took his own life, And some people listening to this podcast will know who he is. He was very much a love person, had a wife, two kids, aged 4 and 7, if I remember correctly. And after a few days of finding out it happened, I myself was struggling. So there's a group that me and Daniel are in, one of these facilitator WhatsApp groups, and I said, "Look, I'm struggling with this. Is there somebody that can help give me the perspective that I need to see, that'll help me come at it from a place of gratitude?" Anyway, you reached out, said we're all happy to have a chat. We missed each other on the phone a few times, and then we had this phone call. And I'll never forget this phone call because you were giving me the perspective, you were helping me, that was helpful for me, and but then for me, the synchronicity in this whole moment. So um, I used to live in South Africa. You're South African. You know that's maybe not that crazy for people, but I'm just painting a bit of a picture here. But we then had this conversation. You were explaining what happened, and then what I didn't know at that time, I knew about your brother because you'd done it on the training room, but I didn't know all about the past and everything else that had happened with your mum and everything at that point. But you then explained that. But the thing that blew my mind was when we found out that at the time, you had obviously been a football coach, and you were telling me how you'd been a football coach, and then you said in London. I said whereabouts in London, and then you said Southend. Now my friend that took his life was a third generation Southend United football fan. He'd sponsored the club. He was the shirt sponsor, main shirt sponsor, and it was just incredible that this whole this whole thing had unfolded. And then we further then found out that obviously his two little girls, who were 4 and 7, had were the ages that you were when you lost your dad to suicide, but also 7. I believe I'm right in saying is how old you were when the incident happened with your mum as well.
Correct.
So
Yeah.
the synchronicity in that whole experience was just unbelievable. And then you very kindly have since spoken with the partner of my friend the wife of my friend who took his life. And then the other synchronous moment is you're both called Daniel, you know, so there are just so many of these synchronous moments. And I know you've helped her a huge amount. And one of the many reasons I wanted to get you on the show is because I know now that you are committed to helping people, not just with grief when they've lost somebody, but helping people with the tools. I mean, you've just mentioned 3 just a moment ago, to help them deal with the hardships, the challenges as and when they come up, because otherwise those pressures, if they come too much, can obviously get people to do things that is potentially avoidable if they had the tools beforehand, right? And that's something I know you're super inspired to do, and something that you're committed to do. And that's the thing I want people to take away from this podcast, is that you're in a position now whereby you've experienced it firsthand. You know, you said about the third thing was have a support network of people that have been through what you've been through, and you've definitely experienced some incredible hardships that most people could never even comprehend. And you've lived to tell the tale. But not only have you lived to tell the tale, you've thrived to tell the tale, and you're now helping people do that in such a phenomenal way. So I just want to say thank you, Daniel, for the work that you're doing, for coming on the show, for sharing your story. I know you're going to be an inspiration for so many people for such a long time to come in the work that you're doing. Um, Before we look at rounding this up, is there anything that I should have asked you that I haven't, that you think would be important for people to hear that are listening to this today?
No, but there was something I'd just love to end off with. That anything you face just comes down to your perceptions, number one, and more importantly, your ability to process that event as quick as possible. And if you look at any high performer, whether that's an athlete, whether that's an entrepreneur, whether that's a school teacher, their ability to deal with the setbacks determines their level of success. So a nice way to sum it up would be an awesome lesson that I learned from the late Kobe Bryant. So I remember watching an interview that he did, and this was an interview after the LA Lakers had just lost to the Boston Celtics in the NBA final. And the interviewer asked Kobe, he said, listen, so after the NBA final, how long did it take you to get over it? Did you spend the next 2 to 3 weeks at home sulking, being emotional about it and all of this? And Kobe said, no, I went home and I spent the next 2 hours reflecting, feeling all the pain. And then the next day it was, okay, cool. I'm back in the gym at 4 a.m. And I remember sitting there watching it and I was like, okay, I get it. The speed that he processes the setbacks. He wasn't, okay, cool, we lost the final. And more importantly, he didn't look externally, he looked internally. Okay, what can I do better next? What do I need to improve? What do I think? So that's the most important questions. And I think it will correlate back to that number one tool where I said consciousness is, rather than looking externally, start asking the questions internally. Because again, to finish off, you're the one that's responsible for your life. You're the one that's responsible for your thoughts, your perceptions, and your actions.
Absolutely. Daniel, thank you so much. I know people will have certainly been in sort of a amazement with what we've been speaking about, your journey, how you've dealt with it, how you're helping other people now. If people want to connect with you, find out more about you, where can they connect? Where can they find out more?
Sure. So they can just go to my website, which is danielcostagill.com. They can find me on LinkedIn, Daniel Costa Gill, or Instagram. I'm in all of those places. Reach out. I'm happy to help in any way possible.
Daniel, amazing. So everybody that's been listening to this, absolutely go and check out Daniel, find out more. And Daniel, thank you so much for being a guest on the show. I'm sure this won't be the first time that we'll have you on here, and looking forward to continuing to see you thrive over the coming months and years. And everybody that's been listening, until next time, make it happen. Thank you for listening to Make It Happen with Will Polston. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Please feel free to share it with anybody that you think could benefit from it, and also make sure that you hit subscribe so that you get to get the new episodes as soon as they're released.